evening and welcome to Checkpoint. It is the last Sunday of October 2017, and yet uncertainty still looms over the country's presidency. Uhuru Kenyatta is set to be declared the victor of Thursday's repeat presidential poll, while Raila Odinga is unrelenting in his quest for a fresh election altogether. Which way will Kenya go? And what toll has this election cycle taken on the country? We will have this conversation tonight on Checkpoint. But first, the top stories.
5 constituencies. Elections were postponed due to security.
Pressure mounts as IEBC chairperson is forced to defend his tweets on the presidential tally. Vivian Cheruiyot triumphs in Frankfurt as she scoops her first marathon victory. Left without teachers. How the election violence has affected KCSE candidates in Migori. Also tonight, 7 dead in Mogadishu as Al-Shabaab launches 2 car bombs. Thanks for making the time for us tonight. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, and our sign language interpreter is Meresha Owiti. Now, tonight, the IEBC continues its tallying and verification of the presidential results at the Bomas of Kenya. Shortly, we'll be hearing from senior reporter Rita Tinina on the latest figures from there. But first, we want to begin with some good news tonight from Frankfurt, where Kenyan Olympic star Vivian Cheruiyot has scooped her first full marathon victory. The 34-year-old who left the track for the marathon world finished in 2 hours, 23 minutes and 35 seconds. Our sports reporter Robinson Okenya joins me now. Robinson, what does this mean for Vivian? I mean, she's been a track athlete for most of her life up until this point.
Well, Yvonne, this is massive for Vivian Cheruiyot. Remember last year at the Rio Olympics, she won her first ever Olympic title. That was in the 5,000 meter. And after that, she says she's going into the marathon. And today, she won her first marathon. Remember, early this year at the London Marathon, she finished 4th, clocking a time of 2 hours, 23 minutes and 50 seconds. So today at the Frankfurt Marathon, for her to win that, it was massive. Remember, it's not easy for one to for the transition from the track to go to the road. It's not that easy. So after going to the road and what we've seen her do, probably this is the start for Vivian. We might see more coming from her, and you know, her challenging some of the biggest names we have in the marathon in the country. We might see more. Remember, she becomes the first Olympian to win the Frankfurt Marathon. Nobody has ever done that before. And in the women's race since 2013, she becomes the first Kenyan to win Frankfurt Marathon. So for almost 4 years, we've not had a woman win the Frankfurt Marathon. And then she went there. All eyes, of course, were on her to see how well she was going to perform at the Frankfurt Marathon. And you look at the men's side, you know, in almost 10 years, we've had 9 victories, but that did not happen today. And probably, you know, something that Kenyans will be asking themselves, you know, is she going to follow the example of the likes of Eliud? Remember, Eliud Kipchoge moved from the 5,000 meters, joined the road, and probably in the last decade, he has been the best marathoner that we've seen. So are we going to see her, you know, follow that road going forward?
Yeah, so like you said, it's been done before, moving from track to a road race. But just what sort of preparation does it take? I mean, you know, Vivian was doing 10,000 meters and she's now doing a 42-kilometer race. That's quite a leap.
Yes, it's quite a big challenge. I remember probably she was used to the track and now she's going, you know, 42 kilometers. It's not easy. It's something that it's very grueling, and, you know, different cities have different weather conditions. So it depends on the city that you are going to. She was in Frankfurt. Probably it was favorable. The weather was favorable. And probably if I take you back to Eliud Kipchoge, and when he was doing the Berlin Marathon and you look at the training, his training regime, it was wanting. So probably I would want to think that, you know, for Vivian to prepare for the Frankfurt Marathon, she must have put in a lot of work for her to win her first marathon.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that. Robinson Okenya, he's our sports reporter, bringing us the good news tonight of Vivian Cheruiyot's win at the Frankfurt Marathon. Thanks for that. So, we started off on a good note, but want to go back to a top story today that we're keeping our eye on, and that is what's happening with the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission that is all set to announce its final tally of the repeat presidential election. However, speculation and criticism already mounting on the voter turnout from Thursday's poll. Rita Tinina has been crunching the numbers for us from the Bomas of Kenya. Rita, good evening. The chairperson has just issued a rather interesting statement defending his numbers. So where are we with the numbers?
Still not clear, Yvonne, as of today, the chairman trying to defend his tweets, which have created a lot of confusion. On Thursday, polling day, at 9:30 in the evening, he came out to say that there was a 48% voter turnout. This was during his second press conference on that day. He had earlier addressed a press conference around 3:30, and when he was asked about the voter turnout, he said they were still computing the figures. Interestingly, Yvonne, earlier we had been told the essence of the KIEMS kits. Once you log in your fingerprint, it is meant to pick up that statistic. So by 3:30, 9.5 hours since polls began, the commission was saying it was still tabulating the figures. At 9:30 on that same day, then he came out to say there was a 48% voter turnout. But hours later, on his Twitter handle, he posted a tweet and saying that the 48% was a best estimate turnout from the team. Latest actual figures from 267 constituencies show 6.5 million Kenyans turned out to vote. To many Kenyans, Yvonne, perhaps when you're talking about a voter turnout, they would ordinarily calculate such a turnout against the total number of registered voters. While the IEBC this time is using a different formula, it says it is calculating the voter turnout based on the number of voters in a particular, let's say, several constituencies against those who turned out to vote. So Chebukati is explaining the 48% voter turnout. He says on voting day between 4 and 5, just before polls closed, the team took a snapshot. The KIEMS kits, 17,000 KIEMS kits registered 4.4 million registered voters who turned out to vote. And he says in those 17,000 KIEMS kits, there are 9.2 million registered voters. And so he says they calculated the 4.4 million voters who turned out to vote against the 9.2 million registered voters in those 17,000 KIEMS kits. And he says that's how they arrived at 48%. Then he tried to explain his other tweet when he said that there were 6.5 million Kenyans who turned out to vote. And his explanation was that at 10 p.m. on the 26th, after polls closed, they had another snapshot. The commission looked at the figures again. And by then, he says, the KIEMS kits, 33,000 of them had reported figures. And he says by then, they were showing 6.5 million people turned out to vote in those 33,000 areas covered by KIEMS kits, in which they have about 16.2 million registered voters. So he says 16.2 million registered voters against the 6.5 who turned out to vote. That gives a 40% voter turnout. Today, he could not give the figures as of now, what the KIEMS kits in their portal indicating 37 KIEMS kits have sent in their information. But he says as of yesterday, 36,000 KIEMS kits had indicated that 7.5 million registered voters turned out to vote against 17.6 million registered voters in those areas covered by the 36,000 KIEMS kits. You would say a bit of confusion there, but the IEBC chairman is blaming the media. He's saying they focused on the 48% that he announced. They also focused on his tweet, which mentioned about the 6.5 million registered voters, but did not talk about his other subsequent tweet in which he said that as the stations get network, as it says, please note that as more devices get sufficient network connectivity and report, the turnout figures get updated to correspond with those stations. So Yvonne, the chairman trying to clarify, settle that controversy. Interesting times for him, most definitely very tough times for him. But many asking the questions, why hasn't the commission been communicating as often perhaps as it should when he issued that 48% voter turnout, only later to try and clarify through his Twitter handle? Yvonne, maybe some questions there, Yvonne.
Right. I mean, speaking about his Twitter handle, you did raise this question during a briefing yesterday about the clarifications on his Twitter handle. Rather interesting that this wouldn't also come out in the official Twitter handle. Is that correct?
That was a question I posed yesterday. By then, it was Commissioner Abdi Gulier who was responding to questions from a journalist. And when I asked, is it the chairman who posted that tweet? Why wasn't it on the IEBC Twitter handle? And the commissioner said, well, I've not seen that tweet. And I remember saying the chairman is here. He can answer for himself. But it also raised the question, if the IEBC chairman then posted that tweet, which other commissioners were not aware about, was it a collective figure that was discussed by the commission, was informed by figures being updated by the officials? If the other commissioners don't even know what the chairman is tweeting about, fair enough. He has his own capacity, he can tweet, he can give information, but is that information agreeable among all the commissioners? Today, Yvonne, during his press conference at around 7 p.m. Today, there was that question that was posed to him before the polls. He had held a press conference just a day after Commissioner Rosalind Nakombe resigned, and during his statement he said he was also feeling that his hands were tied. There were various issues. There were divisions within the commission. So many questions also being raised. He said that as of now, he can guarantee that the process, the election was above board. He says the questions and concerns he had were already raised. You would ask which questions were this, which concerns were this, to whom were they raised, and what was the response exactly, Yvonne?
Yeah, that's interesting because did he allude to what may have changed between when he made that statement saying he could not guarantee the country a free and fair and credible process between then and now? Because we do understand that he went to the Supreme Court before making that statement to seek clarification on the minor Kiai interpretation of that appeal ruling. But so, did he give an indication of what has changed, who has answered his questions, allayed his fears, and now gives him the confidence to run a fair process?
Well, he didn't. He just said, I had issues, I had concerns, I had questions, I raised them, they were sorted out, they were answered, but he didn't say what those concerns were. He didn't say who answered them. He didn't say what was the procedure in sorting out those issues. You would say in less than 2 weeks. If there were major concerns, which ones were they? How were they sorted out? Was it a process? Was it about legal issues? What was it about? Was it personnel at the IEBC? Was it about the commissioners and the unity in the commission? If there were any divisions, were they sorted out? Remember, during that statement, when he issued that statement, he was actually alone. Of late, though, we have seen that the commissioners are acting together, issuing press statements together. So maybe the issue of unity was one of them. But coming to the tweet that only the commission, the IEBC chairman, was aware of, then you would still ask several questions. The issue of clarity, he tried and explained today that why this process is taking time is that they want to be sure, they want to be thorough in the verification exercise. This is after he sought clarification from the High Court. The High Court sort of upheld a ruling by the Court of Appeal in which it had said the IEBC chairman, as a national returning officer, cannot do anything to the results. He cannot add a comma, he cannot audit, he cannot do anything to those results. As announced in the polling centers, those results are final. But what Chebukati will have to do once those results have been verified, once they have been confirmed, if he notices any errors thereof, he will make sure that he announces when he's declaring the final results. He will have to make a statement and say, this is what I noticed, but still go ahead and announce the results. His lawyers in court, when he was in court at the Supreme Court, had tried to raise the arguments, asking, so what if there are any errors? Does the chairman still go ahead, announce the results with those errors, and in its ruling, then the court says it is something he will have to note before making the final announcement, announcing the winner of the presidential election, which now even looks maybe will be happening tomorrow. As of now, the commission says it is only one constituency that is yet to bring, the returning officer is yet to bring results to Nairobi. They say they hope that will happen by midnight. Right now, 265 constituencies. Returning officers from those constituencies have brought their Forms 34A and Form 34B here. Out of those, 259 have been verified. The turnout, valid votes, 7.5, 7.4 of those are going to Uhuru Kenyatta with a 42.23% voter turnout. So, Yvonne, we are hoping that by tomorrow, everything will be done in the display that they have been displaying here in the last 2 hours. Of the 47 constituencies, according to the IEBC statistics, it indicated that Uhuru Kenyatta had also managed to garner 25% in 33 constituencies. That is with the requirement that anyone who wins the election should have 50% plus one, as well as 25% in at least 24 constituencies. So we'll be keeping an eye on things for you. It seems that the commission here has called it a day. When they addressed the press at 7 p.m., they had promised that they would be coming back at 8:30 to issue a statement on the way forward. Journalists had raised several questions. One of them is about the repeat polls in the 25 constituencies in which the election was postponed. Bearing in mind, Yvonne, tomorrow rehearsals get underway for the KCP exams. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, pupils will be sitting those exams. The IEBC, according to the law, which has 7 days within which to announce the results, has until Wednesday to do so. So what happens? Will the IEBC hold elections in the coming 3 days? Unlikely. Most of the polling centers are also exam centers, and it's also highly unlikely that they can be held there and vote counting takes place and the results will be announced by Wednesday, not even bearing in mind that the leaders from those areas have said, we didn't want this election in the first place. Right. Nothing changes. It will not happen. So, Yvonne, will be waiting to hear what the commission will have to say tomorrow morning on the way forward. Yvonne.
Thank you very much for that, Rita Tinina, that comprehensive report from the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya here in Nairobi. Indeed, we'll wait to see what happens tomorrow. And while that is taking place and we await those results, we'll be having a conversation here on Checkpoint. Which Way Kenya? My guest tonight will be Daisy Amdanyi. We also have Kwame Owino as well as Charles Kanjama. So please do stay with us for more on that. Meanwhile, the National Super Alliance leader Raila Odinga has condemned the violence that erupted in Nairobi's Kawangware area. Raila Odinga, who led NASA MPs for a church service at Gatina PAG Church, accused President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, William Ruto, of militarizing politics in Kenya. And as Jeff Kirui reports, Raila launched a scathing attack on Jubilee Supremos following their calls for Raila to retire from politics.
Days after violence erupted in Nairobi's Kawangware area between two rival groups, NASA leaders Sunday morning attended church service in the area. Raila Odinga accused Uhuru Kenyatta's government of targeting NASA supporters through police brutality in the just concluded rerun of the presidential polls.
We want to condemn the militarization of politics in our country. We are continuing to see increasingly members in military uniform, police officers in combat gear, combing our towns, our villages, shooting aimlessly at our people. This shows to what levels the regime has descended.
Wale watu ambao walileta mungiki hapa lazima wakamatwe na wapelekwe korokoroni.
The Bible says, when those in leadership are righteous, people rejoice. But if those who are in leadership are wicked, people cry and perish like now. Tunasema shetani ashindwe.
Tunataka unity kwa Kenya. Hatutaki kujua kabila ni hii au hii, sisi wote ni wa Kenya. Tukae na amani, tupendane na tungojee amri ya baba. Baba akisema left, baba akisema right.
After the service, NASA Brigade held a rally, Odinga launching scathing attacks on Jubilee leadership over calls for him to down his tools after he vacated his presidential bid.
Wale kila siku wanasema, oh, Raila astaafu aende nyumbani. Raila ni mzee. Yule ambaye anasema Raila ni mzee, mimi nilike ya baba yake au mama yake. Mimi nitastaafu nikipenda kustaafu. Wakati mimi nimeliza kadi yangu, mimi nitaenda bila kuambiwa na Uhuru. Sawa.
And as debate on the exact turnout in the repeat poll rages on, NASA flag bearer Raila Odinga has accused Jubilee of manipulating figures to fit the results of the nullified election.
Wakenya wengi walitikia wito wetu wa NASA wakakaa nyumbani. Uhuru sasa anashindana na idadi ya wale watu ambao walijitokeza kupiga kura. Aibu kubwa on Jubilee. Shame on them. Shame on them.
On Monday, NASA principals are expected to address the nation on their next step, having threatened to sabotage Uhuru Kenyatta if he is declared president-elect by IEBC in the repeat polls.
That's a tilala.
Jeff Kirui, KTN News.
While opposition leader Raila Odinga prepares his next move, political commentators and religious leaders want the NASA leader and President Uhuru Kenyatta to dialogue. But what options does Raila have at this moment? Our reporter Francis Ontomo poses this question to the opinion shapers of the coastal region.
With the repeat presidential poll ending in great divisions for Kenyans and opposition leader Raila Odinga preparing a big statement for the coming week, the country is in a state of uncertainty. Raila, who has mastered the art of keeping everyone guessing, boycotted the repeat polls, which he described as shambolic. Now, the focus is on the cards under his table.
In my opinion, I think there's a need for the two leaders to sit down and dialogue and find a lasting solution for the country. Not a band-aid solution, but a lasting solution for the country, because this has been happening every 5 years.
With talks on secession having gathered momentum within some opposition circles, Raila's camp has threatened to unveil him as the head of state should the Electoral Commission go ahead and declare Uhuru Kenyatta as president for a second term.
How do you unveil two presidents at the same time? One will be legitimate, the other will not. And the legitimacy here is the one who garnered a certain number of votes based on the constitutional requirement and is declared by the institution, which is legally entitled to declare the president.
It is also unclear whether Raila could opt for civil disobedience. While he announced that his National Super Alliance was now transformed into a resistance movement, he has told international media that he will not be taking up the so-called Bush tactics. Some, like Neno evangelism preacher Bishop Robert Wafula, still believe dialogue is the way to break the impasse. Sentiments closely shared by CAPK's Sheikh Mohamed Halifa.
Wote tunahitaji kukaa pamoja, tunahitaji ushirikiano. Na hawa ndio viongozi ambao wako katika nafasi na ni season yao. Ni watengeneze jina au waharibu.
Kila mahali tumechanganyikana, NASA na Jubilee. Mapenzi yetu na ushabiki wetu kwa viongozi hawa wawili yasitupelekee kuchoma taifa letu na kujimaliza sisi wenyewe.
The international community has also not been spared the criticism. Some feel that global leaders need to take up an active role in mediating the current political crisis. And in the scheme of things, youth leaders have not been left behind in airing their voices on the standoff.
Umekaa na jirani yako kwa miaka mingi. Umekuwa ukishia chumvi, umekuwa ukishia sukari, umekuwa ukimsaidia wakati ana shida. Leo hii wanasiasa wasitufanye tutengeneze uadui kati ya mimi na wewe.
Our challenges and our tribe is only one, a tribeless society. The challenges that youth in Nyanza are facing, youth in Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret and all other places, is purely unemployment.
We demonstrate, we loot things, we are being shot in the street, we die. Then what next? The politician will just come and say, oh, we mourn with the people, you are given 10,000 to support the family in burial. Then what next after that?
The opposition is demanding reforms at the Electoral Commission before a meaningful election can be held. The government, on the other hand, does not find this sincere. What now stretches the splitting discourse even more. Francis Ontomo, KTN News, Mombasa.
Uncertainty over KCPE and KCSE exams that are set to start this week has rocked some schools in areas that have witnessed violence in the last 4 days. In some parts of Migori County, teachers have not reported to school for the last 1 week due to the ongoing political temperature.
It is yet again that time of the year when KCPE and KCSE examinations are beginning, with KCPE set to begin on Tuesday next week and KCSE set for the week after. But with the political temperatures so high, with counties in Luo Nyanza recording high number of deaths and injuries due to the ongoing protests against the repeat presidential election, this has not augured well with many schools. At Migori Boys, for example, candidates who are not even registered voters have had it all. Demonstrations and barricading of roads has disrupted learning for the better part of this month for a school like this that is situated in the middle of Migori town.
So the incidents has really affected us in terms of concentration of our boys. We as teachers, we also find difficulties in accessing the school. Like throughout this week, our Form 4s have been in school. They still need us in classes, but we rarely reach them in classes because our town, we cannot access our school because of the problems that are there in terms of political issues.
Migori County is one of the areas where the fresh presidential election was said to be repeated Saturday after it proved futile to conduct the exercise on Thursday. Friday's announcement by IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati that he will announce a later date to repeat the election in this county alongside Kisumu, Migori, Siaya and Homa Bay has left KCPE and KCSE candidates in limbo.
When we remained in school, we've been having lessons with teachers, and you find that most of the time there is gunshots all over. And this one is really drawing our attention even outside. You find sometimes even the policemen are shooting behind our classrooms, even around the field. Some bullets are also, we found them in the field, and this one has really affected us.
Tear gas is thrown behind our classes. We can't even read in a conducive environment. We therefore ask the two politicians to sit down, talk, and even ask the United Nations to come forward and help us in this situation.
In the past week that we have been here, most students have not been going to school. And remember, these are candidates that are preparing for exams. So this is a risk that we are talking about, and this is something that is really affecting the Kenyan children.
Clerics and political leaders in Luo Nyanza have rejected the planned fresh election, saying the poll will subject the regions to further state of chaos and police brutality. At least for now, the students can concentrate, but until the fate of the election is known, their right to sit for national exams is in jeopardy. Cecilia Kesho, KTN News.
Let's go across our borders now. 2 car bombs killed at least 7 people in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, on Saturday. Country police say Islamist group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for this attack. Witnesses say a car walked... Witnesses have said that a few minutes later, a car bomb exploded near the former parliament house nearby. Major Mohammed Hussein, a police officer, said 7 people had been killed, including soldiers and civilians, and that the death toll is expected to rise. All right, so I want to speak to the Information Minister of Somalia, who is joining me now on phone, Mr. Abdirahman Osman. Good evening, sir, and thank you for speaking with us here on KTN News. Can you bring us up to date with the latest numbers from this attack?
Yes, as you said, on Saturday, we have had suicide bombers and detonated cars in downtown in Mogadishu, where the death toll has risen to 27 so far. And they managed to go into one of the hotels where politicians are staying, but our security forces were very quick to respond and managed to safely evacuate for people who were staying in the hotel. And in the end, even though the fighting has been going on throughout the night, our security forces have successfully managed to capture 3 of the 5 of terrorist attackers, and those 3 are in custody. And today, the Council of Ministers, we have had a meeting to discuss about the security issues in the capital, and we have sacked the chief of the intelligence of the country as well as the police commissioner in order to hold an accountable of what has been happening. And as you know, in Mogadishu, we have had the severest of the serious attack on the 14th of October, where we have lost over 358 people in one instance. So that's why we are very adamant in terms of security.
All right, Mr. Minister, how is the country coping so soon after that horrific attack we saw that you alluded to just a few weeks ago, where over 300 people died?
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the worst terrorist attacks in our soil, despite of the loss, but we managed to really to unite the country and the people, and even the young people came volunteering to help those injured people. And we have successfully helped the victims. As you are aware, a number of those seriously wounded were flown to abroad, including in Nairobi, where they are receiving medical treatment. And it's difficult to really imagine the devastation and the destruction that is caused in terms of the businesses and in terms of the morally, in terms of materially. But we are coping because Somalis are good at resilience, and we are doing everything we can. And our president has called and renewed and intensified military operation against terrorist groups, and we hope that soon we will eliminate all threats posed by terrorist groups in our soil.
All right, we've heard of resignations of senior officials in the wake of this attack. Can you confirm to us if that is indeed the case, and who indeed has resigned?
Yeah, as I said earlier, the Council of Ministers today, we have had a serious discussion about the security, and we agreed to hold an accountable on those responsible for the security lapses. As a result of that, we have sacked the chief of the intelligence of the country, as well as the police commissioner.
Oh. All right, Mr. Abdirahman, are you still there? All right.
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So just the final one, way forward now, what sort of assistance, because we know you needed quite a bit after the last attack. Is there any sort of appeal you're making to neighboring countries and indeed the international community?
Absolutely. Thank you enough. Our brothers and sisters in the African countries such as Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Uganda, Burundi, and those who are contributing to the troops in our country, who are really doing well in terms of defeating Al-Shabaab. As you are aware, we are winning the war against terrorists in Somalia, but yet the terrorists have changed their tactics to asymmetric warfare. And now we are asking our partners to really help the African forces who are here, who are giving us blood and their sons and daughters, as well as to provide to the National Army the enablers that they require so that we can end the mission by completely wiping out terrorists in our soil.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Abdirahman Osman, who's the Information Minister for Somalia, bringing us the latest details following that car blast that took place yesterday, telling us that the death toll is now at 27 with 3 suspects in custody. You're watching Checkpoint right here on the show. We thank you so much for being with us tonight. Remember, our focus continues on the election, the repeat presidential poll that has taken place in this country. But today we're going to move the conversation forward a little bit and ask what happens now. What sort of things has the election brought to the fore, and how do we start to deal with them? My guests are here and ready for that conversation. We'll be speaking with them in just a short while, so stay with us right here.